The Seattle Seahawks have kicked off their minicamp for the 2025 offseason. What's going on, everybody? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. It is Wednesday, and yesterday was a pretty big day for the Seahawks. They had the first of two mandatory minicamp sessions at the VMAC. So we've got some stuff to talk about. We had quite a bit of information passed along from the various beat reporters and media members that are there. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at what they have told us, try to get a feel for how things are going, the way in which things are going, and also understand that we're not going to get a ton out of this minicamp because it's only 2 days. So whatever there is to digest, we should digest it, because once it's over, and there's not going to be anything for a while. I mentioned this yesterday, but once they break, it's not until training camp that they come back, and training camp starts, I think, mid to late July, so it's going to be at least a month of not a lot of action. So sink your teeth into the meat that is provided, because soon there won't be anything to sink your teeth into. The plate will be empty. So let's talk about it. We've got a series of posts on X lined up here, just assorted random bits of intriguing news. And when I say intriguing, I mean stuff that's actually relevant to football. Like just as an example, there was a lot of talk from the various reporters and some of the writers about how Sam Darnold likes to eat chicken fingers or something. Like he has a very unsophisticated palate for eating food. That's not really the stuff I'm talking about, right? Like that's fun, that's interesting, but I'm trying to keep it to the things that might actually affect stuff on the football field. And if that does affect things on the football field, I don't think it'll be negative. Chicken fingers are good. So not really thinking about stuff like that. That's just kind of the frivolous and fun stuff that certainly has its place. But just talking about more football on-field related stuff, let's take a look. Please click the thumbs up button on this video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to support the channel. Let's dive in, and let's start with an interesting comment from Curtis Crabtree here. A quote from Mike McDonald was, well, for the most part, it was kind of that thing I was talking about, where the players did such a good job through the offseason that that's why they bumped up the minicamp. So that makes sense. The players get rewarded with extra time off when they do well. But this last sentence here, rookies will stay around next week, that makes me wonder, because I haven't heard anything about that. I wonder if we'll hear anything from the VMAC about the rookies, because what next week then becomes is basically an additional rookie minicamp. So that being the case, maybe we will get new information next week. And hey, the rookies are the guys who need the work the most, right? Like Leonard Williams doesn't need this work. Honestly, a player like Devin Witherspoon probably doesn't really need this work at this point, right? Maybe some guys on the offense could use it, honestly, because we're implementing a new offense. But if you're somebody like even Boye Mafe, or somebody like a Jaron Reed, especially Jaron Reed, or, you know, a lot of these players, you don't really need that extra week of reps. But if you're a rookie, you really do. So maybe we'll get information next week. That'd be great. It's not like we have a massive collection of information that we can pull from right now without it. So some of the notable comments that got passed along. This one probably caught my attention the most from Condota here. He was talking about the rotations on the offensive line. I think John Boyle wrote an article on Seahawks.com where he also talked about some of the rotations on the offensive line. And I think that there are two positions that are very clearly up for grabs here. But the thing that caught my attention in this Condota tweet was this right here. Christian Haynes got one entire 11-on-11 series at center, but also a lot of work with ones at right guard, as did Bradford. So specifically, I'm zooming in on this right here. Christian Haynes got one entire 11-on-11 series at center. So the reason why I'm circling the wagons around that particular comment is I think Christian Haynes playing center could be the best possible resolution to our interior offensive line problems. And the reason why I say that is because I think we've already got a pretty good idea of Oluwatimi's ceiling as a player. It's not high. Pro Football Focus did their ranking lists last week and the week before. They had Oluwatimi as the second worst center in football. And the only guy he was better than was a guy who's a rookie and has never played before and isn't even really a center. Ratledge. So I know that Oluwatimi can get a little bit better than what he was before. He's not going to get that much better, I don't think. He had a lot of college experience. He came into the league very experienced. I think he's close to tapped out, and he's tapped out as being like a bottom 10 center. And I know there are some people out there that really like Oluwatimi, and maybe there are a few people out there who are big on Jalen Sundle. I haven't really seen anything from Sundle to know one way or the other. But Christian Haynes, I think a lot of his issues as a player go away at center. I know he did it at the Senior Bowl, so he's shown the ability to snap the ball previously. And if that allows Oluwatimi to become a backup, which is ultimately where I think he should be, I don't think Oluwatimi's good enough to be a solid starter. Maybe he can be an emergency starter. Maybe he can be a starter for certain teams that find themselves in really dire straits at the center position. But I don't think he should be just like you hand him the starter job before the season starts and you just turn your brain off and you feel good about it. Christian Haynes could be that guy. Christian Haynes could be a good center. He could be a really good center. I don't know for sure because we haven't seen him do it a lot. And we have seen Oluwatimi do it a lot, though, and I just think he's okay. He's passable. Maybe okay isn't even quite accurately capturing it because, again, I think that even in the best case scenario at this point, he is still one of the lesser starting centers in this league. So the fact that they're trying Christian Haynes at center excites me. Now, that does mean you're leaning on either Lomia or Bradford to start at right guard, but I don't dread that the way a lot of people do. I think that has a chance of working out. And to me, that is how you unlock a higher ceiling for this offensive line, honestly. Like, getting Oluwatimi off the field and onto the backup role is how this team unlocks higher potential on the offensive line. That's kind of how I feel about it. Haynes could be a really good or even great center. I don't see Oluwatimi ever being anything more than a slightly below average center. So this excites me. Darnold remains the starting quarterback, as McDonald has indicated before. Locke remains the backup. Milroe remains the third stringer. Darnold, no interceptions, apparently. There was one interception technically, but it was a free play where he just lobbed it up because a flag got thrown. Kobe coming down with the pick, by the way, though. Hey, I like that guy. I like that Kobe guy. I really, really like his journey, and I'm hoping he has a big year this year. Even if it means he gets paid big somewhere else, that's fine. I like that guy, and I wish him well. And if he can have a big year on his way out of Seattle this season, then I'm cool with that too. So it's still Darnold, still Locke, still Milroe. And we also had this article from the News Tribune kind of digging into the day and the offseason as a whole that Darnold has had as a Seahawk so far. So there's a couple of notes here from, I think this is Greg Bell writing this article. I think it is. So just talking about how he had a really nice throw to Cooper Kupp at one point, where Kupp ran a really, really nice route, where Woolen just was caught in a situation where he didn't even know what was coming. But it does kind of capture that overall, Darnold has had more frustrations facing the Seahawks defense in practice than he has had successes, which, again, I think makes sense. The starting offense didn't score a touchdown in 11-on-11 scrimmaging Tuesday. Darnold often held the ball a long time because the defensive secondary was tightly covering Kupp, JSN, and the receivers. So a couple different ways you can read into that, and there's probably a middle ground where you're supposed to be at, right? The secondary should be very good. The secondary should be extremely extremely high up on the list of secondary rankings at the end of the season. If we don't have a honestly top 5 secondary at the end of the season, if not in terms of result, then in terms of ability, then I think that's a disappointment. You've spent a top 5 pick. You have a former Pro Bowler at the other corner spot. You spent the 2nd round pick and you traded up to go get Emin Worry. You've got Julian Love, who's on a big safety contract. You've got Kobe Bryant, who broke out last year. Like, this has the makings of an elite secondary, so it makes sense. If you keep going down the article, there's some further details of a couple nice plays from the defense, trying to hit MVS in the back corner of the end zone, but Woolen breaking it up. Big year for Woolen, by the way. Next play, Emin Worry gets pressure and forces an incomplete pass, and they kick a field goal. So same general sense as the previous weeks, where the defense is ahead of the offense. One other thing, because we're talking about quarterbacks here with all that talk about Sam Darnold, where for the most part he's had it tough, not necessarily because he's doing anything overly wrong, but because the defense is making it hard for him. A couple people did sound off on Milroe, thinking that he had a very good day yesterday. Couple different people said it was his best day so far, throwing the ball well. So, hey, we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere. You know, this is very different than the sentiments I heard a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, I've talked about this already. He is a hard worker. Kubiak was talking about how he's up at 4:30 in the morning doing research. He's putting it all into it. And whatever it is that he can be in the NFL, he will be. And I mean that positively. Like, he will maximize whatever he can get out of his career with his effort. Will it be enough? We're not going to find out for quite some time. Okay, going beyond the Milroe stuff, a couple other highlights would be Cody White had another really good game. It is worth noting that it is non-contact, so receivers often look good. But he made a bunch of plays in the 4 sessions that have been open to reporters, so Cody White trying to make that roster spot, I think he can do it. I think he's got a shot. And another guy, I've heard similar positive things about Jake Bobo, actually. So both receivers doing well. Doesn't mean a ton, but Cody White caught my attention last year in that Rams game and didn't really get another chance to prove that that wasn't a fluke after that game because some players got back from injury. We got DK back, and we didn't really see a lot of Cody White for the rest of the season. So Cody White, good for him, man. Greg Bell lists the main competitions, which are to be as expected. The center, Oluwatimi versus Sundell, and right guard Haynes versus Bradford. So nothing really new there. He does not, it is worth noting he didn't put Haynes on the center list, but it would not shock me if that's the way things go. And I'll say this, if this team does end up putting Christian Haynes at center, that's going to make me feel pretty good about things because it'll tell me that they're really trying to seek out every possible advantage and looking at things in a way that is potentially creative and, you know, just trying to find those little opportunities to improve the possible outcomes for this team. Because again, I really think that Oluwatimi's capped out at being like the 23rd best center in the league. And where does that leave you? It doesn't leave you in a very great place. Maybe he has a higher floor than a guy like Haynes, but maybe he doesn't really. Further notes on those competitions right now are Sundell and Oluwatimi alternating pretty evenly. From Greg Bell here, the fact that a guy like Sundell, who's barely played in the NFL and has absolutely zero pedigree, is alternating evenly with Oluwatimi kind of furthers my suspicion that Oluwatimi is just not that good of a prospect, which is why, while I can live with him being the starter for another year, I really would like to try to see if I could push that a little bit beyond where it is right now. Same with Haynes and Bradford at right guard. These competitions look like they will go well into August, which is what I would expect, of course. But I think that there's I don't even want to call it creative, but there is an unconventional way that this can resolve itself that I think would be really good. Let's see here. A couple other highlights from Corbin here. Nehemiah Pritchett had a good game. That's big. We could really use Pritchett stepping up this year and at least being competent. If Nehemiah Pritchett is competent this year, we don't need to go after a guy like Jair Alexander or Jalen Ramsey. Couple of pass breakups, denied a potential touchdown in the end zone. And yeah, here's the thing I mentioned about Bobo earlier. 5 catches during team drills, caught a pass on 4th down. But the Bobo thing's interesting too, because his roster spot is in some jeopardy if he doesn't step up. But Pritchett, that's big, because that's going to make it a lot easier for us to roll into the season with this cornerback depth chart with Woolen, Witherspoon, Joby, Pritchett, and probably Zy Alexander. If we can be comfortable with that, and by the way, that's outside corners. Strong, very strong. Speaking of Emin Wari, by the way, there were a couple of comments about him, and there's a lot of hype around this guy right now. And this is such an important moment for this regime, that they nail this Nick Emin Wari thing, right? Because Emin Wari is a controversial player. There were a lot of questions about what he was going into this draft. Some people thought he was a top 10 player in the draft because he was so freakishly talented. Other people thought he was a 3rd-round pick because the tape wasn't so great. If they can make this work, that says a lot about their coaching and their scouting ability. Sounds like he's working hard. Nick Emin Wari comes into McDonald's office so much, asking so many questions. I've got to tell Nick, hey, the door's closed, knock. So if there were any concerns that people had about this guy maybe not being super into football, which there was that sentiment being expressed a little bit before the draft, seems like he's pretty into it now. Maybe going in the 2nd round pushed him. Maybe if he had gone in the 1st round, he'd have a slightly different mentality right now. I don't know. But it does seem like he's into this, and that's what we want to see. That's what we need to hear. And also about Emin Wari, this was also mentioned by McDonald. Emin Wari and Witherspoon spent part of practice today working with outside linebacker coach Chris Partridge on rushing off the edge. So I imagine that they're not going to actually line them up as edge rushers. They're going to blitz them off the edge, but it does illustrate this. Hopefully, what is going on here is that McDonald is really assembling his defense the way he wants it to be, where he can do all these different things and throw all these different looks at you and not just have to play basic defense, which he did for a decent chunk of the season last year. You know, for a decent chunk of the season last year, McDonald had to keep things simple because the run defense wasn't good enough to force offenses into pass-heavy situations. Once things got going, it got better. But if they could do that whole year, the defense should be one of the best in the league. And seeing stuff like this excites. I don't see how it could do anything other than excite you for what could be coming. Now some injury stuff here at the tail end of the video. I know this video has been pretty long, but hey, we're not going to have much to talk about pretty soon here. So Ken Walker is the first injury note from the Seahawks. Limited during practice due to an ankle injury. I don't think he's doing anything with the teams. It's all individual stuff. But apparently he should be fine. And there's not much belief that it's going to be a problem going forward. So I think that as of right now, there's not too much to worry about. Ken Walker, not necessarily a player that needs all the work in the offseason to integrate to this new offense. The new offense should come to him pretty naturally because it fits his skill set so well. And the other guy, the other notable guy that was at least partially absent yesterday was Nwosu. He remains in rehab mode from knee surgery. So one thing to remember is that Nwosu did play the last several games of the year, and he actually played pretty well. So this isn't a circumstance where he's still trying to recover from an injury he had last year that kept him out the whole time. This is something that he was able to play through and play well through, and then he's getting more maintenance work done. So I don't think this is anything to be terribly alarmed about. You still don't like seeing him miss time, right? So some other interesting notes. These are not nearly as impactful. Torrey Horton was out other than working on a bike. Same for Quentin Bohanna and Isis Waxter. Now, Waxter is obviously a fringe roster guy. Bohanna might make the practice squad. I don't think there's any way he makes the active roster. Horton, on the other hand, I'm a little bit surprised that he's not doing much of anything because he looked fine in rookie minicamp and he looked fine in OTAs. So I don't know if something got worse. I don't know if they're being careful. Horton has an important role to play on this team, at the minimum with special teams, in my view. So I would really like to get better news there. Hopefully we do. So it is worth noting that Brady Henderson at the end of the day did note that Nwosu eventually came out to watch practice. So all the players are there. It's not like Nwosu's holding out for a new contract or anything. Not that he would. That'd be really weird. But whatever. Point I'm trying to make is that he is there and he's rehabbing. And Ken Walker did take part in individual drills and slower speed team periods, so no full speed stuff, but he sounds like he's close. And again, we've got 3 months before our first game, basically. So I think that's really about it. That was a pretty action-packed first day of minicamp. Now, today, we should have more information coming out. I'll make a video either later today or tomorrow. See you guys then, and go Hawks.